Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. What is God? This is certainly one of the big questions about reality. Upon it hinges all of the other great questions, such as what is the meaning of life? Who really am I? And all matters concerning good and evil, to say nothing of countless other questions. Depending on one's idea of God, it is possible to have a firm notion of what we are doing in this world and what we should be seeking out of life. It is probably the most basic question any one of us could ask, and perhaps consequently the most difficult to answer. It goes without saying that to many people, this question has a very simple answer. There is no such thing as God. This does answer the question in a somewhat unorthodox manner. What is God? God is an illusion, a false belief, a childhood fixation. Whatever one dreams up as the rationale to believe in a deity to begin with, the answer to these people is that God does not exist. Of course, this just prompts the further questions about how reality got here to begin with, and all of the rest. But the firm foundation these people rest their belief on is that whatever the answer is to all those questions, God is not a part of it. There is simply a big hole in the mind where God once dwelt, a hole that must be filled with something. What is that something? This we shall leave for the atheists to answer. But for everyone else, there is no hole because God is still there. But what is God? The almost automatic response to this question is to assume that God is some sort of reality out there which makes everything be and does all the things that God is supposed to do. What exactly this reality is something that every believer has to figure out. To some, God is the proverbial man in the sky. While this seems a little antiquated in this day and age, it isn't clear what better answers there might be to this question. The man in the sky approach is still probably the primary way most believers imagine God to be. It is also unquestionably the image of God, which atheists so fervently don't believe in. It is a relatively easy image to create for God, and it is equally as easy image to reject. God is somehow right there, almost as reachable as a cloud. But God is also not anywhere else, which may create theological problems for everywhere that God isn't. There doesn't seem to be any difference between the place where God is and the places where God isn't. So it's not all that big a leap of faith to say that God really isn't there to begin with. But if this approach has to be labeled suspicious, what else is there? What if God were everywhere? This eliminates that problem of where God isn't, but it produces its own set of new problems. Does this mean that everything is God? This is pantheism, a belief that many monotheists have huge problems with. If everything is God, then what about all the bad things in the world? Are they also God? This God question seems like one big catch-22. Maybe all those atheists have a point. But there is an alternative to pantheism that may avoid some or all of its problems. It is called Panentheism, a slight variant on the word which is easy to miss. This word means that everything is within God, or perhaps conversely, God is within everything. Everything has its own independent reality, but it all somehow exists within this space or arena that we call God. It is not that different from programs and files existing in what we call the cloud. It isn't clear what the cloud really is, but it is clear that the cloud has to be real in some sense. It's the same with God, according to Panentheism. This week's Parsha is called Vayeitzei, which means, and he went. This nondescript title refers to Yakov leaving his family's home in Beersheba to make the long journey to the homeland of his grandparents, Abraham and Sarah, in Haran, a city in ancient Mesopotamia. The reason he did this was on the advice of his mother and father, Yitzhak and Rivka, who told him to go there to find a suitable wife. But this was really a secondary reason for the journey. The primary reason was that his twin brother Esav sought to kill him over the scheme Yaakov and Rivka pulled off in last week's Parsha to enable Yakov to receive the primary blessing from Yitzhak. Yaakov did receive this blessing, and Esav resented it tremendously. So Yaakov had to skip town until Esav's hatred for him was dissipated. This week's entire parsha deals with Yaakov's journey to Haran and what happened to him while he was there. Chronologically, this takes about 20 years, though to the reader, the whole thing seems to take place over a few days. The first section deals with Yaakov's journey, which should have been uneventful, as these long journeys tend to be in the Bible. But in this case, it was nothing short of monumental. The reason for this was that Yaakov stopped for the night somewhere that is only described in the Torah as the place. It seems that he encountered the place, whatever that might mean. But that is not all. When he went to sleep for the night, he dreamed one of the most famous dreams in all of human history. He dreamed of a ladder extending from the earth to the heavens. On this ladder, he saw angels of God ascending and descending. On top of the ladder, he saw a vision of HaShem, who spoke to him the words which would determine his destiny, not only for the next 20 years, but for the long line of descendants that would follow in his footsteps. HaShem told him that the land he was standing on was to be given to his descendants, similar to promises made to Abraham and Yitzchak. Next, he was told that his descendants would spread out in all directions and would be as numerous as the dust of the earth and would be a source of blessing for everyone. Finally, he was told that HaShem would be with him wherever he went, protecting him through whatever situations he found himself. Not only that, but HaShem would not stop this protection until Yaakov returned to this very land. Yaakov, upon awakening, expressed surprise that he didn't realize that HaShem is in this place, and he was unaware of it. He declared this place to be truly awesome, nothing less than the house of God and the gate of the heavens. The rest of the parsha deals with Yaakov's exploits in Haran at the house of his devious uncle Lavan. He manages to marry two of Lavan's daughters, Leah and Rachel, and also takes their maids, Zilpah and Bilhah, as secondary wives. Through these four women, Yaakov became the father of 11 sons and one daughter. 6 of the sons and the daughter came through Leah, and each of the maids bore 2 sons, and the final son, Yosef, was born last to Rachel. She had been barren the entire time the other wives were bearing children, and was only with her giving birth that Yaakov decided to leave and return to his homeland. The final drama of the parsha occupies a long section at the end, which describes Yaakov's attempts to outsmart the ever-tricky Lavan. This section goes into great detail about how Yaakov managed to make his herd of sheep and goats enormous, even as Lavan thought he would receive the bulk of the offspring. When Lavan realized that Yaakov had outsmarted him, he confronted him and accused him of absconding with not only his property, but with his daughters and their children. In the end, Yaakov and Lavan agreed to disagree, and the parsha closes with Yaakov about to cross back into his old homeland, accompanied in some way by angels, just as when he left. Getting back to that journey at the beginning of the parsha, there are just too many subtle hints to something deep going on to ignore. While the dream was certainly very dramatic, with all its images of angels and the ladder reaching to the heavens and Hashem above it all, there is something before the dream ever happened that is also significant. The text states that Yaakov, quote, encountered the place. What does that mean? Why would the Torah state that he arrived somewhere in such a vague and provocative way? What was this place? The Torah doesn't say anything about it other than that it was the place. The only description of how he chose this particular place to spend the night is that he encountered it. It was only when he woke from his dream that he realized that this place was truly special. He understood that God is in this place, a tantalizing hint that there was something unique going on. The ancient rabbinic teachers see an extremely profound idea in this description of the place. They came up with what may be the first truly panentheistic teaching in human history. The Hebrew word for the place, hamakom, is nothing less than a connotation for God. It is what we might call the omnipresent. This is the idea that God is present everywhere and within everything. The original words of this idea are, quote, The universe is not the place of God, but God is the place of the universe. This is panentheism in a nutshell. Let us examine this idea a little deeper. There are two statements in that teaching. The first is that the universe is not the place of God. This is essentially a rejection of pantheism and of any idea that God is somehow located within the physical reality of what we might call the world. The second is that the world exists within God. Whatever reality there is to the world is found within the greater reality of God. God, in a sense, is existence, the arena for all of reality. According to this belief, God is not only the creator of everything, but everything has its very existence within God. This is about as panentheistic as things get. We can now understand why the Torah describes Yaakov as encountering this place. He didn't just stumble upon a certain spot and decide to spend the night. He encountered something there, something that we can call the place. His mind, perhaps in some subtle manner that he was unaware of, realized this reality about God and God's relationship to all of reality. When he woke from his dream with all of its angelic and divine imagery, he understood that this place was indeed awesome. The place, according to this, was not some little spot of land somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It was the idea of God being the place, the reality behind all of reality. He now understood that such a reality was nothing less than the house of God and the gate of the heavens. It is not every day that we have such a vision. It may happen once in a person's lifetime, and only if they are fortunate. It is a realization that the reality of God is infinitely greater than we might imagine from paintings and songs and stories. It is one which encompasses all of what we can call reality. God is the place of reality, the reality within which everything, from the most distant black hole to the slightest flicker of a thought within the mind of a person, exists. Shabbat Shalom.